The Lord of the Rings of Power, the thing that's almost taken up the last 2 years of my life, through releasing leaked scoops, reactions, and even through building a brand, whilst also beginning doing all this before it was cool or even trendy to talk about on YouTube. Then the show came out and passed, which leads us to where we are right now. Often on this channel I, Harry, haven't given my own beliefs or opinions, as I believe when reporting news or leaks, having journalistic integrity and a non-biased factor is key. There is a lot of stuff I have been holding back in, especially my beliefs and opinions around the strengths and weaknesses of Season 1 for the Rings of Power. I believe it is heavily naive to absorb a piece of media and find it completely trash or flawless and amazing, where there is not one success or a failure attached to it. For example, my favourite film of all time is The Return of the King, but I hated Denethor's over-enthused and almost schizophrenic level paranoia, the Army of the Dead serving as a massive plot hole, with them attacking at the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, and so much more. Media and art is there for analysis and critiques, but also for his achievements such as how I prefer film Aragorn and him receiving Andúril near the end instead of at the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring in the books. The point here is that this is the approach I'm taking in tackling a behemoth such as the Rings of Power, and I'm sure in the comments people will be saying stuff like there is not one success, or people on Twitter getting angry at me for trashing the show. Hopefully the intellectual ability to go beyond these translucent takes will shine through. I will discuss a success, then a failure, and continue in that cycle. The first success or thing I think McPain and the team did right is Khazad-dûm and the emotional connections and moments with the dwarves. Even visually, when we enter Khazad-dûm, this is a lived-in kingdom, an important point that we'll come back to later on, from the dwarven extras back at work, to little details such as trees and nature growing to show dwarvendom at its peak. This coupled with excellent performances by the two Dúrin actors and Sophia Nomvete who plays Princess Disa. The dwarves here are beyond just the comical Scottish dwarves that the Peter Jackson movies sometimes embellished, and we see this through Owain Arthur, where the lack of dwarven prosthetics allows us to see raw emotions and reactions, such as the scene on the lift. The fact that Elrond, who is again another great character, spends so much time here also makes this plotline even better. However, a key problem that ultimately even hinders this plotline for Season 1 is screen time.
Give me the meat and give it to me raw.
The Rings of Power is a show juggling too many things at once, not allowing us to fully understand or connect with some characters, especially with some characters whose, spoiler alert, deaths may be coming soon. For instance, Celebrimbor, the character who realistically should be a central figure of this show, just pops up in episode 2, maybe once in episode 3 and 5, and then behold, the whole finale is centered around him. The development of these characters are uneven. We do see the insights of characters like Galadriel and Nori. What do we know about the intentions, personalities of the rest? Gil-galad, a ruler of a kingdom with about 2-3 actual visible on-screen places in his kingdom, and I personally believe Gil-galad was a bit overacted and ultimately walking around like a massive asshole. This is the High King of the Elves, who helped the transitions of the last remaining houses of the elves migrating to Middle-earth at the end of the first age. In this regard, I am worried. Season 2 has 8 episodes with even a 2-episode battle, which cuts things, and if we are getting Celebrimbor's death maybe at the end of Season 2, that is still not enough time. Will his death be meaningful if we get so little of him? Then when we do get him, it's still not the best writing. Will the screen time in the next seasons allow us to see the more ruly and kingly Gil-galad we want to root for by the time of the War of the Last Alliance, or just continue to be like an angry manager at a job you'd want to leave? The screen time for some characters left them really undeveloped, and sometimes even thinking why are they even in this show. The frustrating thing here is that the screen time is being taken up by the original characters like Nori and the Harfoots, Arondin Bronwyn, which are one of the more blander romantic relationships I have seen on screen, and even Adar for example. This is a problem engulfed in Season 1, but there can still be hope for improvement if we get to spend more time with our beloved canon characters. We just spoke about him, so now let's move back to one of the successes of this season, which is Adar, evil including Halbrand, and the thematic interpretation of the orcs. From the beginning, one of the standout performances and characters of Season 1 goes to Joseph Marley, who plays Adar. Even though an original character, he felt almost like a relic from the first age. I could perceivably see him as an elf along the riverbank in Beleriand before he fell. coupled in with the visual menacing nature of the orcs, from the detailed prosthetics to the little details like the helmets on their head protecting them from sunlight. The potential future leader of the orcs, Halbrand, also known as Sauron, was surprisingly one of the more stronger parts of the season for me. This is where I give the showrunners warranted leeway of what to do with the character that between 500 to 1200 of the Second Age didn't do much, and this was the period we pretty much covered here in season 1, and in some versions Tolkien even described Sauron in a human repenting form after the First Age, so that is an aspect of Sauron as Halbrand that I did like. What I saw as a failure for the first season was having to play the guessing game as to who is Sauron, but more the mystery box nature of the first season. The narrative and plot of the Rings of Power is governed by surprises and mysteries to the nth degree. Who is Sauron? Who is the stranger? Who are these white-robed characters? Who is Theo's father? Who is Adar truly? Where is Anarion? Where is Celeborn? What is this mystery sigil? Who is the king of the Southlands? What will happen with the Balrog?
Tell me your name.
I have been awake since before the breaking of the first silence. In that time, I have had many names.
Season 1 almost seemed dependent on these mysteries, with the Halbrand, Galadriel and stranger Nori being the two main plot points of season 1. Even though the payoff for the Halbrand Galadriel reveal wasn't even that bad, the concept and idea of the overall plot being based on guessing who is who is a bit overkill. A perfect mashup of the previous two failure points are the mystics. No explanation as to who they are, which race even, why they are after the stranger. They just come out of nowhere in episode 5, and then we see next to none of them until episode 7 or 8. They are mainly there to serve the Who is Sauron plot in making us think it's the stranger.
Our Lord Sauron.
I am going to do a bit of a strength and weakness mixed together in one point, as it is quite conflicting and it's around the Harfoots. Through them we got a sense of the wide scale of Middle-earth. This really helped with the world building, but looking back in the end, were they really a necessary addition for the plot? First off, I think MacLeod as Nori was brilliant, and in a way these Harfoots felt the most like Middle-earth to me in this show. But that is because hobbits is what we have mainly seen in Middle-earth adaptations. Looking back, could you make this season or even this show without the Harfoots? Yes. Firstly, they took up the second most screen time after Galadriel and Halbrand, and mainly served the plot to serve the stranger and his identity, and the reason they got so much screen time is the reason why it wasn't actually that bad, because we got to see so much of them. Nevertheless, my favourite moments of this first season were the 20 minutes of footage and time we spent in Eregion with Celebrimbor and Elrond roaming around the Eregion gardens and fields, and this felt most like the Second Age to me. What this show maybe should have been focusing on is spending time in within Eregion, and maybe we could have spent as much time here instead of with the Harfoots. And this could have even helped the screen time issue we mentioned earlier and benefit the knocked off elves from season 1 like Gil-galad and Celebrimbor from earlier. However, a purpose that the Harfoots did serve was that they made the world feel big, such as being scared of whatever these characters were, and crossing forests, and even the Wandering Day montage. This made Middle-earth feel big. I mention this because it links with my other failure, that when you have a franchise like Lord of the Rings, which in films and books embellishes journeys through different lands and places, characters trekking and going from one forest to the next or one kingdom to the next, this is what makes a world feel real and lived in. Galadriel and Halbrand riding a horse from near Orodruin to Eregion in a few seconds, and then Elrond and Celebrimbor in one scene making it from Lindon to Eregion and then from Eregion to Khazad-dûm just hampers the world building essence of what makes Middle-earth so splendid. This point can be linked to the limited screen time of 8 episode jam-packed season. Though let's not forget, this show is beautiful, and despite the prologue being heavily simplified, the Tyrion shots were mesmerizing. Eregion was an amazing elven city, clearly signifying elvendom at its peak. Lindon as well, but to a bit of a lesser degree, and we have already talked about Khazad-dûm. But the real benefactor here is Númenor. That opening montage in episode 3 is where this $1 billion budget has gone to, and even the capital Númenorian city, and all the statues clearly signifying this is the height of men. I'm sure the Rings of Power will win a lot of these technical awards for this, and this goes for the music and score by Bear McCreary as well. But a lot of these cities don't look like they are lived in. Let's take Lindon for example. You would think only Gilgalad and his clothed elven maids lived there, and although we did see some extras and different locations inside Lindon in episode 1, it was pretty limited after. Then we have the Southlands, where when you become the king of it, you seem to be the ruler of 7 huts and about 50 people, or Phadazon's speeches in front of 30 people, or the Númenorians having about 5 ships available in their fleet. I know COVID may have been an issue, but I don't get why they couldn't have digitally added people up the scale a bit. We haven't really touched upon Númenor until this last section, but I believe Númenor felt a bit overlooked or pushed to the side. We barely get the meat off the bone in regards to Phadazon, who should be a key player in this show, and though we see some scheming with his son Kemen about exploits in Middle-earth, it is still not developed enough. The strength of the Númenorian storyline comes from Elendil and Miriel, as well, who I personally see as a mix with Telperion. The performance of Lloyd Owen is superb, and the basic values and traits of one of the faithful is clearly shown through him. The use of the White Tree of Nimloth was also quite intriguing and symbolic in many ways, such as Miriel's decision to change her mind. But again, very limited in what the storyline can produce overall if we see so little of it. Like Eärien was a part of this as well, but I almost only remember the dinner scene and the painting scene 5 episodes later. Isildur is a tricky one too. The idea of a character arc and transition from a young boy into a man is clear and could work, but I think they are playing a bit too hard with the struggling aspect. Nearly there, we have the lore or canon in season 1 of The Rings of Power. These two terms in regards to Tolkien are always loose, with the idea of what the lore is often conflicted due to the various accounts Tolkien wrote, Galadriel for example, but canon being the most established and distinctive aspects of the works, for example Rivendell being the kingdom of Elrond. So technically, giving the benefit of the doubt to McPain, as with all adaptations just like Peter Jackson's, they have to sometimes change or alter or tweak something to help support a different medium. But there are canon characters, and after watching the season, I still don't see the reason why so much was invented when you have Círdan, Celeborn, Narvi, Ortha, even Glorfindel, all there written by Tolkien, and these are canon characters. By not putting in these characters and instead having so many wholly new ones, I don't get what difference it makes having these characters in the show instead of so many new Harfoots, new humans, and so forth. Another thing I understand and came to terms with is that stuff and events in the season will be original, as McPain have limited rights to work with, so I don't hold this against them too harshly. But what I don't get is changing the existing or canon events when these things are so limited already. It's like it's almost not helping them in a way with their reactions from Tolkien fans. For example, the whole approach to Annatar, who funnily enough they do indeed have the rights to, they have Halbrand instead. And having the 3 elven rings forged first and the whole process of Annatar seducing Celebrimbor happen so quickly. But the biggest example of this is the Mithril-Silmaril connection alongside the rapid fading of the elves. I don't want to sound too harsh, but I don't get how you get given the appendices, read it all, then maybe read the Lord of the Rings and then the Silmarillion, and then after reading all that work and making a show on the Second Age, come to the conclusion that Silmarils are going to be connected to Mithril, which in fact the Silmarils are a critical aspect of Tolkien's entire legendarium. So already, firstly, you are walking on a tightrope. Couldn't there have been a more tangible and at least slightly more canon empathizing way of causing the drama? I understand stuff has to be made up, but having it create something so left field from what's available is quite strange. And maybe having a way of causing tension away from just having midway through the season the elves are fading, which is another strange thing. It seems like we just come to episode 5 and then the elves are just fading out of nowhere. I feel like there is a way to build this tension up, and I can see that tension needs to be built in the season. Another criticism of the show is that it was quite slow, so I can see the need to build it up. So overall, I think there could have just been an easy way to build up that tension and see the roots and beginning of this problem grow from earlier on. So that is my overall evaluation of season 1 of The Rings of Power. This is my honest and explicit thoughts without any bias in mind or trying to pretend everything is great. I'm sure there will be hate comments saying how did he even get one success for the show, people thinking why am I giving so many failures. Well, thanks for the view. Make sure to like and subscribe, but until the next video my friends, goodbye.